Welcome everyone from the community. Today we have a very special guest, someone whose career and story are truly inspiring. Mr. George Salazar is a retired NASA engineer with over 40 years of experience in aerospace engineering and system design. Through his career, he has worked on some of NASA's most critical programs, including the Space Shuttle, the X-38 spacecraft, and advanced avionics systems. He has been a leader in telemetry, communication, human-computer interfaces, and even developed voice recognition system for space applications. His work has contributed directly to astronaut safety, innovation in avionics, and the future of human space exploration. But beyond his technical achievement, he has dedicated his life to inspire thousands of students and young engineers around the world. Mr. Salazar, it's a true honor to have you here with us today. Welcome, and thank you for your presence in this interview.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. It's a pleasure being here, and I'm happy to share any information I can that'll benefit not only students, but maybe even adults that are perhaps out there struggling.
Great, that's amazing. My first question is, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself, about your career, whatever you can share with us will be helpful.
Oh wow. All right, so I'm second generation. My grandparents came from Mexico. My parents did not have education or a good education per se. My dad got it to the fifth grade, about the fifth grade, and he had to drop out to help the family. My mom was an orphan by the age of 10, and so she and her sisters actually, and brother, my uncle, they were picked up by an orphanage in San Antonio, and they stayed there for a long period of time. So my mom never really got an education other than second grade, but that didn't stop her from learning to read and do math on her own. So the background in education for me was very weak, and I have to say that perhaps that's part of the, let's say it was part of the challenge, if you will, of growing up. Is my parents and even my grandparents emphasized work ethic more than education. Education, what they say, is good, but being a hard worker and is very important. And so, they come from the old school that, working in the fields and working, to make a living was important. So that's kind of my background there, that kind of shorten it a little bit. In high school, in school in general, I was a mediocre student. In high school, I wasn't all that great of a student. I actually graduated the bottom 20% of my high school graduating class. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that I had to take over the family business. My dad bought a donut shop, and he suffered a non-fatal heart attack when I was a junior, and so I had to run the business while going to school but making sure the family got fed. So as a result, my grades and all that were on that fantastic. So when I wanted to go back to school, it was very difficult because I did not do well in the SAT or the ACT test. So I had to, let's say, petition and look for a junior college that wanted, or at least, accept me. And there was the one that accepted me on a probation basis. And so from there, that's where things took off for me, that eventually ended up at NASA.
That's really inspiring, right? It's something that, I think is something that you never give up about your situation and the situation or your previous situation from your family, right? I think you see what you want to do and you made it, right, in the end of the day. What first inspired you to pursue engineering and eventually join NASA?
There's a saying that goes something like, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And that's what happened to me. I wanted to go back to school because I worked in construction. I worked selling books door to door, doing donut making business. And I couldn't see myself doing this, as I got older. So going back to school was one way that I felt that I wanted to, let's say, create a better career, if you will. And so it was actually not until I got married that, my wife helped me think about, going back to school. And so I did. At that point is where I felt I wanted to do something better for myself, but also for my family. And for my family history, I was the first to graduate from high school. I was the first to actually graduate from a junior college. I found that inspiring to know that I'm helping change the direction of my family. And as a result of all that, actually now, we have 2 daughters that are very well accomplished, and I'm hoping that my grandkids will follow the footsteps of grandpa and grandma.
Yeah, that's really good. Congratulations for that. My second question, what challenge did you face early in your life or career, and how did you overcome them? So what was your challenge so far?
Okay, so early in my, the challenges kind of break up into the university or schooling because I was very weak in mathematics and science and all that. I had to study double hard compared to some of the other students that they were younger than me. And they were very accomplished in high school. And so one of the challenges that I found was not to compete with the high caliber student. I was finding myself disappointed because I couldn't make 100 in thermodynamics or 100 in calculus 3. And so I said to myself, instead of beating myself over my head or trying to compete with it, I'm not just going to do the best that I can. But I do have to say that challenge was, let's say, compensated by me working in fields that benefited me, that eventually I would come to NASA. So 2 of the jobs that I got while I was working at school, while going to university, was one, I was working at a Canon calculator doing repair as a repair technician for the Canon calculators, and I got that job actually because of my associates in applied electronics technology. So that experience, coupled with I got during my junior year a internship with a seismic exploration company I did 3 semesters there. And so the combination of those 2, when it came time for me to graduate, and the NASA came to the university to interview, the interviewer, Mr. Robert Brown from Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, liked the fact that I worked in the fields of electronics, that I worked in the field of engineering, and my grades were okay, but he appreciated the work that I did. In fact, he also appreciated that as a young 16-year-old, I was running a donut shop business while going to school. Yeah. And so because of that, Mr. Brown said, "Hey, George, we're going to invite you over to Johnson Space Center for an interview for a job position that opened up." And so I did, and I interviewed the second time there at the Johnson Space Center with Mr. Ralph Sawyer in the Tracking Communications Division, and from there was the beginning of the start of my NASA career.
That's really inspiring. Did you ever imagine you will spend more than 40 years at NASA, like while you were a student?
No, I didn't. I have to say that actually, when I interviewed with NASA, there were other companies that I also interviewed with, and they were offering more money than NASA. But Mr. Sawyer wanted me to come work with NASA, and so when I told Mr. Sawyer, well, he wanted me to come work, and I said, well, Mr. Sawyer, I got a couple other opportunities that are paying more money than NASA, so I'm not sure. And he was the kind of guy that took no for an answer. So he went and got on the phone and called the human resources director to come and talk to me. And I remember very, very vividly that he was talking about a room away, but I heard him shouting, "I don't care what you're doing right now. I want you here right now, and come and talk to George." And so next thing I know, in about 10 minutes, here comes I think his name was David Schuler, and he convinced me to come work at NASA. I just wanted to get a job initially,
of course,
and start making some money because I did have a family. I had a daughter already. I was getting ready to graduate. I have to thank Mr. Sawyer. I have to thank David for convincing me to come work at NASA.
That's great. Probably they will know because we will post this in LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
You work on the space shuttle, the X-38. Can you talk about this if you can, of course? Like,
Oh, yeah. So
yeah.
the X stands for experimental. So the experimental X-38 was actually a return crew vehicle that was going to be used for the space station. And so we were developing the capability of a spacecraft that launched like a rocket and returned to Earth like an atmospheric aerospace vehicle. So my responsibility was the flight control systems, and so that's where I really started to learn about systems engineering, because I had responsibility for developing the flight computer systems as well as the architecture for the avionics of the X-38 space vehicle. So I had to start learning a lot more developing flight hardware for spacecraft. The whole aspect of spacecraft flight design, there's some areas that was not taught in school. Like, for example, in the space environment, in a microgravity environment, the thermodynamics effects are a little bit different in that the thermal effects is that heat is transferred conductively and not convection like we do here on Earth. So I had, you have to design systems that can conduct the heat away from the avionics, and then basically radiate it out into space. The other thing is radiation effects, galactic radiation, cosmic particles that can upset the computer systems and cause major problems with flight control and things of that sort. So we had to design the flight control systems for dealing with all that. So I got involved much more in terms of developing flight hardware for the natural and the induced environment of space. So that was a challenge in itself. I can't tell you how many hours I spent.
Yeah, that sounds a bunch of calculations. Try and
I have to say that experience actually broadened my view about systems development, and looking at the holistic view of what it takes to build a system. It's just not the hardware and the software, but it's also the human and the tasks that are required, the mission that's required, and of course the environment that all this is involved with.
Of course, yeah, that's really good. I see you mentor over 19,000 students, right? So what motivates you to share your knowledge with the next generation?
Oh boy, it's another one of those that I happened to run into. So when I was at the university, I did a little bit of outreach with the one of the organizations that I belong at the university, outreaching to elementary school kids and high school kids while I was going to the college. And so I kind of enjoyed that. I enjoyed the seeing the faces light up, or learning. I would do very simple science experiments, and some of the kids, especially the kids that we went to, these were in the east side of Houston, that primarily were Hispanics, and they were just amazed, that they had a university student giving science experiments for them. So all that transferred over when I joined NASA, because then I started to find out that NASA did a lot of that. And so there was something called the Educational Outreach Programs, and there was another one called the NASA Speakers Bureau. So I joined those, and actually for a couple of reasons. One was not so much for trying to develop my speaking skills and being in front of people, because I was somewhat of a shy person. But the second thing was, to inspire, students. And so from there, it just took off. Mr. Gutierrez, next thing I know, I started to get involved with major events. One of the big ones in Houston is the Houston Hispanic Forum, that basically brings in anywhere from 15,000 to 20,000 students to the George R. Brown Convention Center. And so NASA was one of the sponsors, if you will, of that event. And so I volunteered for years doing that and talking to students and telling them about the work that I was doing. But at the same time, I was also telling more so the Hispanic students about one of the challenges that I had was that because of my background, that I felt that when I started to work at NASA, I had this what they call the imposter syndrome. Meaning
Yeah.
I don't belong here.
Yeah.
My family, they were just, farm workers, and they worked in,
Yeah.
blue collar workers, no
Yeah.
college whatsoever. And here
Yeah.
I am,
The
working
first
with
one.
probably that I
Mhm.
felt that I couldn't live up to the expectations that some of my division chiefs and branch chiefs expected of me in developing spacecraft systems. So that's something that I had to get over with. That's something that I share with students, is that the imposter syndrome, sometimes we
Yeah.
will tend to encounter that, but don't let that be a stumbling block, if you will.
Yes.
Because we all have I use the term inertia compared like inertia that's used in physics, the ability to do work. And so that inertia can be turned into momentum, and that's what I did. I had
Mhm.
the inertia, the ability to learn and to do something, but the way to do it is to get out there and start studying and doing it, and that's the momentum aspect of that. And so it's just something that I found very beneficial in helping students feel like, hey, even though you're whatever, don't come from a very highly educated background, that you can do it too. It's
Of
just a
course.
matter of putting your heart into it.
Of course. Yeah, and that advice is really powerful. Yeah, it's really because I think we Hispanic people have the same situation, right? Like, oh, maybe what I'm doing here, why I'm here doing this, doing that. And sometimes I think what you just mentioned is something that we need to have, like think or believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will do, right? Yeah, I think it's a really powerful advice. I forgot to mention that Mr. Salazar is a professional engineer, so he holds a PE license. Is the PE license a requirement for work at NASA, or is not like mandatory?
A PE license is not required at NASA because it's a government agency. And so I learned through the legal office, if you will, government employees are covered by the the government rules and regulations, for working with people. Not so in the private sector. In the private sector, you got to have a PE license, especially if you're dealing with, let's say, something that can affect, that could
Public safety.
basically harm people.
Mhm.
And so the reason I got my PE license is because I was doing a part-time job, if you will, working for a company on the side,
I see.
dealing with, they were called tankless water heaters. And these tankless water heaters use basically 220 volts to heat up water. And so there was some risk associated with electric shock, things of that sort that could harm people. And so the owner of the company said, hey, George, can you get your PE license? And I said, yeah, I think so. So that's when I started to learn about the PE license. Now,
I
in
see.
Texas, and I'm not sure about other states, but in Texas, you cannot call yourself an engineer unless you have a PE license.
Same thing.
That was the other thing. And of course, I learned also that during the time of the Challenger accident, a friend of mine was called to testify about some aspects of the Challenger, but when he said that he was an engineer at NASA, they stopped. According to Gary Nealis, he said they stopped the court interview, and they said to strike that from the records that he was an engineer because he didn't have a PE license. And so Gary shared that with me, and actually it was news to Gary. And so I started to learn about the importance of the PE license, and then I took a class later about having professional, let's say, things under your belt, because in case the company gets sued, one of the things that the jury will look at is to see the company's qualifications for the for doing that kind of job. And if they all have PE license and engineers and all that kind of stuff, they'll go easy on the company if they're being sued. And the same thing happens with doctors as well. That's why they become members of the American Medical Association, and they have to maintain their doctors' credentials and all that.
Yeah, that's true. PE requirement to call you as an engineer, it's really, it's really tricky because when we come here from South America, we don't have that kind of issue or legal issue there. There, if you graduate as an engineer, you are an engineer, right? Which in some points makes sense, but also it's true that you need to have a proof after experience, right? Like, okay, spend some experience here under the supervision of this PE, and then you got your PE, and then you can call yourself professional engineer. So that makes sense for me as well. I heard you have a book, right? So I will love to hear about that book. If you can, present your book here, feel free to do it.
Yes. So the book is an autobiography from the Barrio to NASA, navigating life's unexpected challenges.
Okay.
I started thinking about writing my autobiography about 2 years ago, right before I was getting ready to retire. One of the things that I was learning, at least from my experience, that I was, some of my family members were dying. I thought about people had a lot of knowledge under their belt about family. And so, to make a long story short, I just saw myself saying, I need to leave some kind of legacy for my family, and maybe for people that are, and students that were in the same situation I was. And so I started to think about, writing the book in terms of where I come from, my family history. Some of it was not all that fantastic. I had a grandfather and his brother that rode with Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata during the Mexican Revolution.
Okay.
And then, from there going to my challenges in high school or school, and junior high. And then from there, moving from Corpus Christi, Texas to Houston, and starting off working various odd jobs, as I mentioned, doing construction, things of that sort, to eventually going back to school, the challenges of going back to school, and then eventually coming to NASA and working various projects. So all that is in the book, including a snapshot of some of the technical papers I've written, as well as some of the patents that I have too as well.
Okay, that's beautiful. That's incredible. So I will add your link to the video description. So the people who is interested to get the book, they can go to Amazon. I think it's in Amazon, right?
Yes.
So they can get the hardcover version, and I think you have a Kindle version as well, right?
It's actually the paperback version and the Kindle version. Yeah.
Okay, great. So they can read in the iPad as well. So okay, that's really good. Finally, what message would you like to share today with the young professionals and immigrant engineers watching this interview?
Going back to the imposter syndrome is dealing with, especially if they're young professionals starting out, come from a background like myself, is that don't let that stop you. There is a saying that a friend of mine from NASA actually would tell me that meant a lot to me early on. And it basically said, if it is to be, it is up to me. And so, always feel that don't let anybody stop you from doing what you want to do in your life. There's going to be critics out there, and I didn't mention some of the a little bit of discrimination that I had, but that's in my book.
Yeah.
But I didn't let that stop me. I didn't let the imposter syndrome overtake me. I didn't let some of the comments made about my background stop me. It's you decide what you want to do with your life, and don't let anybody tell you any different.
Of course, that's a beautiful advice. And back in the time, I think there was a discrimination with the Hispanic people in US, unfortunately, and that's even worse than the new times, right? Than right now. So it's inspiring. I think you deserve a movie as well, documentary.
So a friend of mine, we talked about that. Actually, he brought it up, and he said, "Well, who you want to portray you, George? And I said, somebody simple like Antonio Banderas, So.
That's great. Well, this is the end of the interview. Thank you so much for this opportunity, because to be here, to accept this invitation. I'm really, thankful for this opportunity. Hopefully, we can have you in the channel, frequently with some other topics, very interesting topics for the engineering community. I know they will love this interview. It's really inspiring. Thank you so much, Mr. Salazar, for this opportunity.
My pleasure, Mr. Gutierrez. Thank you for having me.